I spent the last 6 days reading by the sea in Croatia, and I want to talk about the books that I read because it's quite an eclectic mix. My name is Chloe, welcome to Recovering Book Snob, where I talk about the books that I'm enjoying at the moment and maybe some that I'm not enjoying. Starting strong with a highly suitable summer read, I read Carrie, Soto is Back by Jenkins Reid. This book is about Carrie Soto, who is a tennis player in the 90s. She, at the peak of her career, got loads of Grand Slams, smashed loads of records, and she comes out of retirement to try to defend her record. This book was exactly what you can expect from a Jenkins Reid book. It was kind of juicy but sentimental and easy to read, but still like well written and complex, and sort of got across some really beautiful emotions. I always describe Jenkins Reid as juicy, I realised, and I think it's because her protagonists are often celebrities. They also have overlapping characters, which is fun. Like, the books aren't sequels, but you'll see characters crop up. Mick River seems to be the one that crops up in all of them, and he's awful, so it's kind of funny seeing him come up. I played tennis when I was younger, so that was also a really fun element. The tennis scenes are very detailed and accurate and are really well constructed to build tension. It does feel like you're watching the match as it's being written, and it was just a little bit original, like, well, for me at least. I haven't read a book like that that's based around sport and the focus is so much of it is around sport. It sounds like something that could get repetitive if not executed well, but this definitely didn't. The protagonist is, she's also very high achieving, very determined, often quite abrasive, like quite rude to people a lot of the time, and quite isolated, like not good at maintaining friend relationships, romantic relationships. And so she's kind of unattractive, but I think that's what, or at least classically unattractive, but I think that's what's so much fun about her. You know, she feels like a real person, and that's another thing that Jenkins Reid is really good at, is these female characters that aren't the typical sort of role model of what you would consider to be like the perfect woman. So yeah, all in all, an incredible book, but also a very, very good beach read. It was just a perfect one to kick off the holiday. Next up we have Yellowface by F Kuang. I don't know how to, let me explain the story and then I'll explain after. So the premise of this book, if you haven't heard already, because I feel like this is you know, really hyped at the moment, as the kids say. There are these two kind of frenemies who are both writers. They went to college together, and very early on in the book, so this isn't a spoiler, one of them, the way more successful one, dies actually like in front of the other one. It's described in this really graphic, like weirdly comical way, and it is like, that's a theme in this book. It's got this dark comedy about it. Athena Liu, the deceased and the hugely popular writer, was Asian American, and June, the friend who witnesses her get deceased, is white. And the synopsis actually describes her as a basic white girl. And June steals Athena's manuscript and publishes it as her own, and there's this cat and mouse of June trying to hide the fact that she's stolen the manuscript, and not just stolen it as well, because the manuscript is about a part of Chinese history, she also publishes it under a sort of new author name that's intentionally very racially ambiguous, and you see it from June's point of view, and June is a pretty dodgy person. So you have this really mean, like, voice. I think overall it's a really clever book. It's very readable, and it's also quite horrifying. A lot of the plot also hinges on like Goodreads reviews and tweets and Twitter and the internet and just social media, so that's quite entertaining. And as I mentioned, the protagonist is also really unlikable, which I enjoy. I love a good unlikable character. The only thing is that I feel like the idea was so much stronger than the execution, and the main character didn't feel as refined as I would have hoped. I don't know whether it's just not my type of book. I ended up giving it a 3-star instead of a 4. I sort of wasn't sure what to go with. I still feel like it's going to constantly hover between 3 and 4 in my brain, but yeah, I definitely think the hype oversold it for me, unfortunately. Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart was the book I read next, and this book was stunning. I feel like it's one of those books where I can't even do it justice. Obviously I'm going to try and talk about it and give it justice, but I just highly recommend it. Douglas Stuart is an extraordinary writer. I've never read any of his books before. I will definitely be reading more of them because I know that Young Mungo is his second novel. It is set in the East End of Glasgow. It follows Mungo. He's 15 turning 16. He just doesn't fit in with the life that he's meant to be following. He has a tic on one side of his face that worsens when he's nervous or uncomfortable, and falls in love with James. And not only is his sexuality something that definitely isn't accepted by his family or like his wider community, but James is a Catholic and Mungo is Protestant. There are a lot of reasons why their love is a difficult one to pursue or have or fall into. Mungo's family is also a very unhappy setup. His dad died a while ago. His mum is alcoholic and often disappears for weeks on end. His sister is a beautiful character. I loved his sister. And then his older brother is a kind of leader of a gang. It's a really distressing, difficult book to read a lot of the time actually, but it's also just a really beautiful love story. The other thing that's really key with this book is you have these two points on the timeline that it flips between. Mungo basically has been sent on a fishing trip with two men who are complete strangers that his mum just met at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and the fishing trip is really grim. The men, it sort of turns out, have been to prison. These are all things that his mum just didn't know about before she sent him. The idea was that they would like help him become a man, and so you flip between this present day fishing trip and also the events that led up to it. The voice is also really interesting because it's third person, but it flips between almost, you know, when third person is, it's like it's hovering above the character and it's in the character's brain, so it kind of feels close to first person. So it flips between that really intimate style of third person and a much more distant onlooker who doesn't necessarily know the person style of third person. And I think it's really cool because it helps you understand the characters from their point of view and who they are, but also from the point of view of like not knowing them and who they seem to be. Writers and Lovers by Lily King was the next book I read. This was a very random selection. By this point because I only thought I'd read 3 books on this holiday. This book follows Casey, who lives in Massachusetts. I think that's how you say it. How do I not know this? I'm now thinking about it too much. Casey's mother has recently died very suddenly. She has a strained relationship with her dad. She is a writer, but writing is yet to be fruitful. She's been writing her novel for the last 6 years, and she is currently a waitress. That's how she earns money. She has friends, but it's very challenging, and obviously she's not earning as much as she kind of needs to. Her landlord's a pretty mean, annoying guy, and it's one of those books. I read The Idiot by Elif Boutman a few months ago, and it's very reminiscent of that. It's woman in her 20s, 30s, you know, late teens. She's lost, untethered, doesn't really know who she is, doesn't know what to do with herself, like anxious. She's also kind of her own worst enemy. A lot of what she does is unhelpful and illogical, that is a word. And she does stuff that's very contradictory. So yeah, a very relatable character. And because she's a writer as well, like I really enjoy, and this is another thing that I really enjoyed in Yellowface, it's fun reading books that talk about writing. It was a sort of 3-star for the first third, and then slowly crept its way up to 4-star for me. And I think it's because often with these first person POVs, when they're a bit chaotic or a bit like certain worries or certain things get introduced or characters get introduced and then nothing ever happens with them, and it's a bit all over the place, it can feel annoying and it's unclear at first, for me at least, whether the author just isn't executing it that well, or whether that's the whole point and that's the state of the character's mind. It became very clear that the writing was great and I really enjoyed it, but I was only really sure of that towards the end. Does that make sense? All in all though, just a really lovely, hopeful story, and I'm realising that I really like books of this genre, like lost woman genre. Evidence of the Affair by Reid, another Taylor Jenkins Reid. My plane was really delayed, so I needed something to pick me up. This is a short story and I was like, ooh, lovely, something I can read in less than an hour just to keep me going, just to keep spirits up. I found this book a bit disappointing. It is about a woman who finds letters from another woman in her husband's briefcase, and she writes to the husband of the woman. So you end up with this correspondence between woman being cheated on and man being cheated on, talking about their partners and their own situations, and they then become close and friends, and it's a very interesting format because it's only in letters, so you see letters from all of the 4 characters. I think it is a really fun concept, but something about the execution wasn't it for me, and I don't know whether it's because that type of thing is hard to fit into 100 pages or whether it just the topic wasn't quite for me, but it was still pretty good, pretty entertaining, kept me merry and uplifted while my flight was delayed and I was sitting on the tarmac. So what more can I ask for? Finally, we have The Mothers by Brit, Bennett. I haven't finished it yet, but I've made a start and I'm really enjoying it so far. Brit Bennett also wrote The Vanishing Half, which I haven't read. This is my first book of hers that I've read, but The Vanishing Half I know is very popular. It's kind of been on my TBR for a while, which is kind of funny because why am I reading the one that wasn't on my TBR? It's just classic me. Putting a book on your TBR almost lessens the possibility of it being read. Our protagonist Nadine is in her last year of high school and she's rebelling. She lives with her dad. Her mother has recently passed away. I feel like I'm not doing it intentionally, but I don't know whether loads of books at the moment have themes of grief, because I guess it is a common thing, or whether I'm subconsciously attracted to themes of grief. But this is another one with a dead mother. Nadine has a fling with the pastor's son. She ends up getting pregnant and has an abortion. That all happens quite early on in the book. It's what I've covered so far, and I believe we then follow her and Luke, the pastor's son, still stays in the picture along with another friend. And the book is meant to be about, what was the quote actually? Whether a what if can be more powerful than an experience in itself. What's also fun about this book is that it's told from the point of view of the church woman, that the mothers, that's where the title comes from. So it's got this really warm, gossipy tone that I'm enjoying. But yeah, overall I'm loving this book so far. I think it probably will be a 4-star read, but who knows? It might drop off. I hope it doesn't though. I'm just being silly, sorry. Anyway, that's it. 6 books in 6 days, or at least 5 and a bit books, but reached 6 books in 6 days. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a good week, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.